In terms of our agenda today, it is to focus on the resolutions. We will pick up on resolution 7 to go to 21 in the time we have available. Following that, it is all election results related. And we are awaiting, of course, notification from the electoral officer as to when that voting is closed and then when the timing where he would be in a position to provide the results. It's currently scheduled at 1 o'clock, and we will again adjust as we need to in terms of him carefully and considerately doing his responsibilities there. So with your permission, and then we will of course do the acknowledgements that are there on the agenda, and then do our close following those around currently scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon. With that, if in your permission, let us turn to the resolutions. We were on resolution 7, and I will ask Maureen to bring that up. As you may recall, Chiefs, there was a discussion on resolution 7, just to the implementation of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Regarding, that process being responsive to First Nations concerns and not impacting First Nations initiatives. And so I understand that there's been quite a bit of work done to find some wording on that. And I will look to the mover and seconder, first of all, to confirm that they are present in the assembly. And then second of all, to see if they want to provide an update in terms of the language. And is that Cookby Wilson?
Yeah, I'm here, Harold. I don't know if you can see me.
Good morning.
Morning. I'm fine with the revisions to the resolution. It took a little while, but I think we got it.
Great. And then I think the seconder was Chief Spahan. Was that correct? Chief Spahan, are you present in the assembly?
Yes. Good afternoon, Harold. I'm here, and yes, I read the resolution.
Excellent. All right, thank you. And Maureen, we'll go back down to the therefore be it resolved then. So therefore be resolved 1, 2, and 3 remain the same, and you'll see some amendments there in 4 and 5. And just to be for clarity, just adding that reflects the input and direction by BC First Nation, so really emphasizing that. And then the following 5th clause, the BC AFN Chiefs and Assembly direct the regional chief working with the UBCIC and the First Nations Summit as the First Nations Leadership Council to convey to the province. I believe this first half is as is. And then finally, towards the end, it says, other constructive arrangements that may be entered into by Indigenous governing bodies and recognize the importance of involvement of Indigenous governing bodies associated with government-to-government agreements in the action plan, including exploring with BC of the development of DRIPA regulations to enable DRIPA implementation through government-to-government agreements. And so approved and accepted by the mover and seconder. I'll look to see if there is a need for discussion on this resolution. I will ask you to use your raise hands function. Otherwise, in the interest of time, I will move rather rapidly to the question. Moving back up here on my speakers list. All right, and not seeing any hands, then with your permission, Chiefs, let us move to the question on this resolution 7, implementation of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act as amended. Are there any abstentions from this resolution? Please indicate by using your raise hands feature. Are there any abstentions to this resolution? Do I have a voice there?
Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair. I don't know. I don't see the raise or lower the hand function on my computer.
All right.
I just have the participants chat screen, record, and reactions.
All right. If you click on your participants button, it'll open up a list of all the names. And at the bottom of that list, generally on the right-hand side, there will be a raise hands function. If it doesn't say raise hands, there might be 3 buttons there at the bottom right, and you can click on that at the bottom of the participants list, and it'll show the raised hands. Once you've raised hands, when you've spoken, then you would also lower hands. Were you able to find it, Cookby?
Thank you.
Okay. And did you wish to speak on this, or were you just clarifying technology?
Just clarifying technology.
Thank you very much, sir. Hearing no abstentions, then, are there any objections to this resolution as amended?
From the kitchen at the store, do you want anything?
Seeing none, are there any objections to this resolution as amended? And
No objections.
Seeing none and hearing one confirmation that there are no objections, then with your permission, we will indicate that this resolution is carried by consensus of the Assembly. Thank you very much. We will now turn to sorry, I muted myself there somehow. So Chief Morgan, your microphone is on, so I'll ask you to mute, please. And let us turn to resolution number 8 regarding the salmon and fisheries strategy. So the decline of Pacific salmon and support for a cohesive BC First Nations fisheries strategy, moved by Chris Lewis, proxy for Squamish Nation. I will need a seconder. And Chris Lewis, if you could indicate by raised hands function that you're present in the Assembly, that would be very helpful. I see Chris is present, and I see Chief Don Tom has offered to second the resolution. So thank you very much, Chief Don Tom. So this resolution essentially speaks to the decline of the Pacific salmon fishery, notes some of the inadequacies of government policies and regulations, emphasizes BC AFN and First Nations Fishery Council actions to date to protect and restore the Pacific salmon. And it also includes supportive references to the United Nations Declaration, as well as some court cases, related court cases. Is there a need, and we'll look at the therefore be it resolved, and quite a few here. Therefore be it resolved that the BC Chiefs and Assembly fully support the First Nations Fisheries Council's development of a cohesive BC First Nations fishery strategy that would let First Nations regional fishery organizations work together to advise the government and coordinate strategic action to restore salmon stocks. The BC AFN Chiefs and Assembly direct the regional chief and staff to work with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs and the First Nations Summit as the First Nations Leadership Council to help the First Nations Fishery Council to develop a coherent strategic approach to salmon fisheries in BC by identifying key priorities, including the status of Pacific salmon and priority access, as well as providing resourcing and support for leadership participation and coordinated engagement with the Crown. 3, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly direct the regional chief and staff to develop a communications plan, including a strong digital advocacy campaign to build awareness and support for a cohesive and engaged BC First Nations fishery strategy. 4, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly urge the federal and provincial governments, alongside the relevant ministries and officials, to reinvigorate their working relationship with the First Nations Fishery Council and the First Nations Leadership Council by committing to meet regularly to discuss and advance action on Pacific salmon, including the development and implementation of a cohesive BC First Nations wild fisheries strategy. And 5, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly call upon the federal and provincial governments to support the First Nations Fishery Council and the Leadership Council's work on developing a First Nations wild fisheries strategy by providing adequate resourcing and funding so that the First Nations Leadership Council and Fisheries Council can consult and engage with First Nations communities and First Nations fisheries organizations, ensuring priority dialogue to inform the strategy. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? I see Chief Robbins has his hand up. Chief Robbins.
Yeah, can you hear me, Harold?
Yes, I can.
Okay, just a couple of concerns around this resolution. I see nothing in there about climate change or regulation of major water tributaries on accumulated impacts. I would also like to see something in there on the Cohen Commission and the response or lack of response from DFO on the Cohen Commission regulations and schedules that were put forward.
Okay, and Chief, at this point, I would say, are you looking for wording, and do you have some wording to suggest, or are you providing, in a sense, some implementation advice that you want the Fisheries Council and the Leadership Council to pay attention to?
I'd like them to pay attention to it and possibly add it to the resolution, or even as a separate strategy around water habitat and fish habitat.
Yeah, and so is there, so you've mentioned 3 issues, right? Climate change, the river tributaries, regulation of the river tributaries, and the lack of DFO response to the Cohen Commission.
Yes.
Maureen, is there a place to name those three things as issues and concerns to be included?
I can suggest adding a therefore be it resolved with those three items in there. I can either take it away and work on it with Cookbee, or I can do it right here into the,
Let's try some quick wording if you have it.
okay.
Well, I'd just like to hear a response from the mover and
Mover and
seconder to this.
seconder, that might be, okay, that may be sufficient then. Cookbee Wilson? Just regarding the concerns on climate change, regulation of river tributaries, and the lack of DFO response to the Cohen Commission.
Yeah, I think those are real issues, and many of our nations are experiencing them. I agree with
Sorry,
Maureen if she
Cookbee,
can
yeah.
include it in.
Yeah, Cookbee,
Can you hear
did I
me?
call him? Yeah, sorry, Cookbee, did I call him the wrong mover?
Oh, maybe you did. I
I'm
thought
trying to
it was
move
another
too
resolution
fast.
I'm moving. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Chris Lewis, sorry about that. Thank you,
Yes,
Cookbee.
yes. Just want to thank the chief for the comments in full support of his recommendations. I see this resolution, this issue as one of our biggest challenges to our rights to fish and our the infringement on our rights to fish. So whatever language we need to strengthen this resolution, I think is needed. And just want to thank Chief Robbins for those additions and in support of those additions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Maybe
Comment
just
from our-
Harold, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt there, but I just want to acknowledge the way we opened the meeting today. And the reason why this came to mind is seeing Stephen Point as part of the opening today. His words as a young leader back when the union and the BCAFN first began, I think was key in protecting our interests, because a lot of our rights are tied in with the salmon. And
Thank you very much. And I'll just go back to Maureen. So the third one is the lack of DFO response to the Cohen Commission. All right, so with the addition of those 3 points, I do see Cookbee Ignace has his hand up. Chief Ignace?
Yeah, I want to say I support the resolution, but I want to, because of our experience as a result of the Elephant Hill wildfire, what I learned from that drastically was how the forest is managed will definitely have a serious impact on the rivers and tributaries, and as a result of that, we ought to be mindful when we're talking about fish, looking at with our eye on how the forest is being managed, because it will have a serious impact on the fisheries. No matter how hard we try to work on protecting the fisheries, unless we keep an eye on what's going on in the forestry practices, we'll never be able to get very far with our rehabilitating or strengthening or protecting our fisheries. Just
Thank
a
you.
comment, that's all.
Thank you. You're not asking that for the to be added?
No.
Thank you very much.
I'd like the people of this resolution, moving this resolution forward, be mindful of that.
Thank you very much. I see Chief Leon and Proxy Young. Chief Ralph Leon, if you'll unmute your mic. There you
Yes,
go.
well, I'm looking at B, the impacts to river tributaries.
Yeah,
Should we be adding in all of our brothers and sisters who are on the ocean, and maybe those that are just starting with the beach saying up in the Shuswap lakes? I don't know if we need to add in oceans or lakes.
she'll add those tributaries, oceans, and lakes, including fish habitat. Thank you, Chief. I'll ask you to lower your hand, and we'll go to Proxy Adina Young.
thank you. It was a really good opening. I appreciate it. I'm in support of this, and I just wanted to make a comment with that addition that we're adding in there. Something that comes to mind is one of our Haida laws, and it's pronounced Ginwad Luan Gut Af Pagdang. It means everything depends on everything else.
Thank you, Adina. Appreciate that. And last comment perhaps to Chief Ed Robbins.
I think it should be accumulated impacts
Okay,
to river tributaries and oceans.
accumulated with an A. Okay, and then Chief Jacob, Colleen. And then I'll look to call the question. Chief Jacob, if I could ask you to unmute your mic, there you go.
Yes, thank you. I think one thing I would like to add is for us to focus on the impacts that we are experiencing, like our way of life. I'd like to include that. Thank you.
Okay. All right, and Maureen has noted in the chat that this is a mirror resolution, and we are just really refining it a little bit for the BCAFN interest and the interest of the chiefs that are participating. I do think we do want to resist the urge to try to include everything, just recognizing that this calls for the development of a strategy, and that analysis that leads to the strategy would cover these and other issues. With that, then I'll just look back to the mover and seconder to just make sure we're still good with the changes that have been made to the new therefore be it resolved 3. And then with that, we'll call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the mover, I'm supportive of the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. And our seconder?
Thank you, Harold. Yes, I support the amendments.
Okay. All right, I see Chief Robbins and Chief Jacob have put their hands back up again. I'm anxious to move to the question. Chief Robbins.
Oh, no, sorry, Harold. I just forgot to take it.
Thank you. Chief Jacob, is that a new request?
Yes, it wasn't so much livelihoods, but could we say our way of life, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that then, unless I hear otherwise, I will assume that the mover and seconder are okay with that slight change. I'll ask Chief Jacob to lower her hand in the participants list. And we will move to the question on the amended resolution number 8. And so are there any abstentions to this resolution as amended regarding the Pacific salmon and the fishery strategy? Seeing none, hearing none, are there any abstentions to this resolution? Seeing none or hearing none, noting no abstentions. Just to be clear, there are no objections to this resolution, correct? As it has been amended. Again, seeing none and hearing none, then with your permission, chiefs and proctors, we'll note that this is carried by consensus as well. We will then move to number 9, which is the support for the Mi'kmaq fisheries. And on that, as Maureen is making that adjustment, we will need a mover and seconder. And of course, this one responds to the actions taken against Mi'kmaq fisheries as they've been exercising their recognized rights. And it does note that the fact of that kind of pushback against the exercise of recognized rights is applicable to the BC situation as well. And so I will look, I do see Chief Chris Lewis as proxy has moved it, and I see Chief Wayne Christian has seconded it for us, as well as a number of others. I do thank the others who've raised your hands as well. So I think we have Cookby Christian as a seconder on this one. I'm ready to just make note, sure we note Cookby Christian as a seconder. Because in about 3 minutes when I'm trying to remember who that was, I may call on the wrong chief again. Thank you. And so therefore be it resolved That the BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly condemn any acts of violence and aggression committed against the Mi'kmaq fishers and attempts to hinder Mi'kmaq members exercising their legal fishing rights. The BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly direct the regional chief and staff to work with like-minded organizations to advocate and support the Mi'kmaq Nation and to ensure that government inaction and indecision does not bolster and condone the infringement of Mi'kmaq rights and further acts of hostility and violence. And the BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly call upon all relevant federal and provincial ministers and government agencies to safeguard the unextinguished and constitutionally affirmed fishing rights of the Mi'kmaq Nation and to prosecute any illegal protest or criminal behavior from those seeking to undermine those rights. Is there a need for discussion of this support resolution? I see Kopi Ignace.
I would like to call a question on this, but on
Thank
this
you, sir.
resolution.
Thank you. Okay, last call for any discussion. Otherwise, we will move to the question. And Chief Ignace, I'll ask you to lower your hands in the participant list. With that, then, are there any, I see Chief Fred Robbins' hand back up.
Just around the justice piece with the RCMP, I know there was lots of discussion around the RCMP and their roles of not really engaging or stopping any of the violence that was happening over there. Is there room in this resolution to add something around the justice piece?
Yeah, although I think that's what they're trying to get at they do say that to ensure government inaction and indecision does not bolster and condone the infringement of Mi'kmaq rights and the further acts of hostility and violence.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Is there a need for further discussion? No. Not seeing any, then let us move to the question. Is there any abstention? Are there any abstentions to this resolution on support for the Mi'kmaq fishers? Are there any abstentions? Seeing or hearing none, are there any objections? Are there any objections to this support resolution? Seeing or hearing none, then with your permission, Chiefs, we'll note that this resolution also carried by consensus. So we will move to resolution 10. It relates to the personal student education numbers. And as you recall, Tyrone McNeil spoke to this issue last evening. And essentially what it notes is that unexpectedly in February 2020, the province amended legislation regarding the educational status to call for, and it also expresses concerns about the call for the personal education numbers, which extended the authority of the minister to issue those at birth, and concerns about inadequate consultation with First Nations and its inconsistency with the Declaration of the Rights of Implementation Acts, also not being supportive of First Nations self-determination. H, you will see, lists some of the key concerns which are emphasized in the resolution itself. And therefore, be it resolved that the BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly fully support the First Nations Education Steering Committee opposition to the unexpected and abrupt amendments to the School Act, as well as the Ministry of Education's failure to adequately consult BC First Nations and address concerns about how the assignment of personal education numbers to any child that is a BC resident, including from birth, may negatively impact Indigenous learners. The BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly call on the Minister of Education to, 1, refrain from exercising the new authority under the amended School Act regarding the assignment of personal education numbers to any child resident in BC, and 2, engage in a meaningful consultation and collaboration with First Nations and the First Nations Education Steering Committee to A, identify the implications of assigning personal education numbers to any child resident in BC, including from birth, and B, make recommendations on how to align the School Act and related policy regarding personal education numbers with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as required by the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and 3, FNESC will regularly report back to the BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly on its discussions and work with the Ministry of Education to address concerns and issues related to the assignment of personal education numbers to children in BC. We will need a mover and seconder on this. May I have a mover? I do see Chief Andrew Victor as a mover and Chief Proxy Chris Lewis as a seconder. And I also thank Chief Ignace for offering that as well. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Seeing none, is there a need for discussion of this resolution?
Question.
Seeing or hearing none and being encouraged to call the question, let us then move to the question. Are there any abstentions to this resolution? I see a hand from Adina Young. Is that an abstention, Adina?
Yes, please.
Yes, let's note that. Thank you. I'll ask you to lower your hand. Once again, are there any abstentions to this resolution? Seeing or hearing no further abstentions, are there any objections to this resolution? Are there any objections to this resolution? Seeing or hearing no objections, and with your permission, we will note that this resolution is passed by the consensus of the remainder. Thank you very much for that. We will now turn to resolution 11, which is the BCAFN's Governance Committee. And just as we're going to that, you will recall that you have instituted over the last year a 6-member interim committee, and the board is recommending the modified terms of reference for the next 3 years for approval. And essentially, when you look at those modifications, to indicate that it's not interim, that the term runs for the next 3 years, and make space for the names to be appointed in the subsequent combination. And then we will be looking for the 6 nominations. Let us look at the nominations first, and then we'll come back and get a mover and seconder. So do we have people that would be willing to stand forward as the governance committee for BCAFN to serve until the close of the annual general meeting in 2023? If you could just indicate by raising your hand in the participants list. I see Chief Wayne Christian, Cookby Christian has, I'm assuming is volunteering his name. Thank you, Chief. I see Chief Courtney Adolph Jones. Adolph Jones, sort of. Thank you very much. Adolph Jones. Thank you. And if that's correct, Courtney, you can lower your hand. Any other volunteers? Chief Donna Jam.
Can you repeat what this is for again?
It is for the BCAFN Governance Committee. It's a 6-member committee that oversees the governance process. And you recall that at the Special Assembly, we did adopt some terms of reference as well. And yeah, so just and therefore be resolved, B, that just stay there for a second if you don't mind. Just as a reminder what it does, provides terms of reference to investigate any complaints about the conduct of the regional chief that are referred to it, periodically review and recommend amendments to the bylaws and the governance manual, and consider and advise the board on any governance matter referred to it by the board. I do see Chief Lugie has raised a hand, and just correct us if that is, we're assuming that's as a nomination. And we do need 2 more names. I see
Harold?
Chief Prince. Yes, Chief Don Tom.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Chief Jack of Muchlet.
Chief Jack. Is that Jerome Jack? Is that the right first name?
Yeah.
Thank you. And if Chief Jack on the line?
Yes, I am.
If just to check to make sure you accept that.
Yes, I'll accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Eileen, just to make sure that that was a nomination. Maureen, I do see your hand is still up. So was that just to nominate or did you wish to speak? Chief Lugie. And then Chief Eileen Prince, we did put your name in as an E there as a nomination. I see your hand is up. Chief Prince, did you wish to speak? If not, are there any further nominations for the governance committee? Seeing none. Chief Prince, I'll ask you to lower your hand if you don't wish to address the assembly at this point. Seeing no more nominations, hearing no more nominations, may we then proceed to have a mover and seconder for the appointment and the terms of reference for the governance committee. I see Cookby Ignace, thank you very much. I need a seconder, and I see Chief Lee Spahan, thank you very much. I thank Chief Justice Kane and Chief Leon for offering as well. So Chief Spahan. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution on the slightly revised terms of reference and the appointment of the 6 named people to the governance committee?
Call question.
Question being encouraged by Chief Jackson. Appreciate that. No need. If there's no need for further discussion, then are there any abstentions to this resolution? Are there any abstentions to this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, are there any objections to this resolution? Are there any objections to this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, then with your permission, Chiefs, we note that this is carried by consensus as well. Thank you very much for that. We will turn to Resolution 12, which is the BC Elections Appeal Committee terms of reference. And then 13 will be the appointment of appeals commissioners. So I believe I need a mover and seconder on this, but the board is of course proposing some changes to the terms of reference. Briefly, that the term begins after the close of the appeal process following this AGM, which you'll see in therefore be resolved E, and that G is just to go back to G just briefly. I couldn't read my own handwriting. Confirm the appeals of results that occur at this AGM will be heard and decided by the individuals that are currently on the appeals committee. And then once that appeal process is done, then the people will appoint in the subsequent resolution will then assume the position. It does remove the reference to the initial, and it provides space, initial interim piece that we had there. It does provide space for the names as well. Therefore, be it resolved that any appeal that may be filed in relation to the elections taking place at this annual general meeting will be heard and decided by individuals appointed to the 2019-2020 Elections Appeals Committee in accordance with the bylaws and the 2019-2020 terms of reference, and 2, the draft 2020-2023 terms of reference are hereby ratified and approved. May I have a mover and a seconder for this resolution? I see Chief Lugie, Maureen Lugie, has offered to move the resolution. May I have a seconder, please? I see Chief Fred Robbins has offered to second it. I thank Chief Sled as well for offering. With that, is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Chief Lugie, I'll see your hand is still up. I'll just ask you to lower that. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Seeing or hearing no need for discussion of this resolution, let us then move to the question. Are there any objections to this, are there any abstentions to this resolution to adopt the terms of reference and for the appeals committee? Are there any abstentions? Seeing and hearing none, are there any objections to this resolution? Are there any objections to this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, then with your permission, chiefs and proxies, we indicate that this resolution is carried as well. We will then turn to resolution 13, which is appointment of the appeals committee. I will need a mover and seconder of that resolution. Again, indicating that we pursuant to the adoption of the terms of reference and current bylaws, and noting in therefore be it resolved C that the following mix of skills and experience are requested: experience managing or supervising elections some legal expertise, some experience adjudicating disputes as a part of an administrative tribunal or similar body, and familiarity with BCAFN processes and procedures. And so we are looking for 3 names to serve on the Elections Appeal Committee. Current members being Merle Alexander, Edith Lauren Kuhunga, and Victoria Russell. So I will look for raised hands for those people wishing to nominate the names to the Elections Appeals Committee, which would begin following the conclusion of any appeals that may arise at this AGM. I'll look for raised hands for offers to be on the committee. And I did note that some of the members of the current members, or the members of the current appeals committee, are present as well. And if they're in, I know they were interested in staying on, please raise your hands if you are using the participants list, if you could, please. So once again, I'll just ask for nominations for the 2020 to 2023 Elections Appeals Committee.
Hello, Harold. This is Charles.
Yes, Charles.
Like to nominate Merle Alexander.
Okay, thank you, Merle Alexander. I do see Edith Lauren Kuhunga has also raised her hand, and so thank you very much. I will assume, Edith, that you are offered to be on that committee. Appreciate that. And we will need one more name. I see Chief Shane James is offering to be on the committee. If that's correct, I'll ask Edith to lower your hand. Are there any further nominations to the Elections Committee? I see a hand from Chief Maureen Lugie.
Good morning.
Yes, Chief.
Good morning. Thank you. I want to nominate Chief Cynthia Joseph. Thank you.
Okay. We do have an offer of Chief Cynthia Joseph. Chief Joseph, are you willing to accept that? Is Chief Joseph with us this morning? Yeah, I do see her in the list of participants. I'm not sure if she's at her computer at the moment. Are there any additional nominations? Maureen, maybe I'll just ask you to clarify for me then our process.
This committee can only have 3 appointments. So we can do similar to what we did yesterday with respect to the AFN appointments.
Okay. All right. And then I do see a hand from participator observer Cheryl Kazimer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification. Typically, an appeals committee is made up of representatives that are not directly linked to the organization. And I see Merle's name there, and I understand that he's legal counsel to the BCAFN currently. So I'm just wondering if, is there criteria for that, or is?
Yeah, the bylaw just requires experience managing or supervising elections, legal expertise. It's a combination of that. I don't know if there's any other criteria. I'll see if I don't know if Darren Haynes wants to address that. And then Merle, if you're present, I just want to make sure that you are willing to put your name forward.
Yes, thank you, Harold. And to address the question, the bylaws do not have any requirements for individuals needing to have an arm's length relationship to the society. It does speak to the fact that member delegates, chiefs, may serve on the committee, but it is silent as to whether, for example, legal counsel, a lawyer who's currently advising the society, could sit on the committee.
All right, thank you. And I see Meryl's hand up, so just to go there. And Maureen, just could you make the zoom in a bit on your screen? Over to Merle, proxy Merle Alexander.
Hi there. Yeah, I hear the concern of the observer Casimir, and I'm very happy to step aside and as a nominated member. So I'll decline the nomination.
Thank you very much, Merle. Thank you for helping us out there. And I'll ask both of you to lower your hands. With that, we do have 3 nominations for a 3-member committee. Are there any further nominations? Cheryl, I see your hand is still up. Did you wish to address further, or is that just need to lower the hand?
Just need to lower my hand, sorry.
Thank you, no problem. All right then, hearing no further nominations, we do have the 3 members there. I will need a mover and a seconder. I see Chief Ray Giroux, Burns Lake, thank you. And I see Chief Marilyn Slett, thank you. I want to thank Chief Al Jam for offering as well. Is there a need for further discussion of this resolution to appoint the 3 named members to the Appeals Committee? Chief Shane James.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on it. It's a proxy holder. It's not chief.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll just ask that the staff, just your name there, just a little naming protocol there. Thank you very much, Shane. Is there any need for further discussion of the resolution? Hearing or seeing none, let us then move to the question. Are there any abstentions to the resolution for the appointment to the Elections Appeals Committee 2020-2023? Are there any abstentions to this resolution? Seeing or hearing no abstentions, are there any objections to this resolution? Are there any objections to this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, then with your permission, chiefs and proxies, we will note that this resolution is also carried by consensus. We are now turning to resolution 14, which is parity and carbon tax rebate application. It does have a mover and seconder, Chief Casimir and Cookby Ignace, both of whom are present. I see Edith Laurie Kuhunga's hand is back up. Edith?
Yes, good afternoon, Chiefs, and nice to see you, Harold. I just want to thank the Chieftain Assembly for the opportunity to serve in the last 2 years on the Appeal Committee, and I look forward to continuing to serve in that capacity. And so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edith. It's good to see you again as well. All right, let us move to 14, parity and carbon tax. The mover and seconder being present. And let us just move to the therefore be it resolved on this one. Therefore be it resolved that the BC Chiefs and Assembly call on the provincial government to engage in meaningful dialogue with regard to carbon tax rebate to support the development of a collaborative task force to work together on resolving the carbon tax regime and for the provincial government to share those revenues that are taken from reserved lands. And 2, that the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly support Tacoma, Sewepum, and other applicable First Nations to implement a carbon pricing regime and retain the funds allocated from the regulatory charge. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Chief Casimir or Chief Ignace, would you wish to address it? If not, and seeing no call for a discussion, no hand being raised, is there any further need for discussion of this resolution? If not, then let us move to the question. So are there any objections to resolution any abstentions? Resolution 14, parity and carbon tax rebate application. Are there any abstentions? Seeing or hearing no abstentions, are there any objections to resolution 14? Are there any objections to resolution 14? Seeing or hearing none, then with your permission, we will note that this resolution is also carried by consensus. Thank you very much, Chiefs and Proxies. We will turn to Resolution 15. Protection of the inherent right of First Nations to use and possess eagle feathers and parts for social, cultural, and ceremonial purposes. It is moved by Chief Ralph Leon and seconded by Chief Hardman McLeod. If make sure that our mover and seconder are present in the assembly. I do see that Chief Hardman McLeod is here, and I do recognize Chief Leon has been in the assembly as well. Again, just in the interest of moving through the many therefore whereases, let us go to the therefore be it resolved. And as you can see, some work has been done on this resolution. Therefore, be it resolved that the BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly call on the provincial government to establish a process to address issues related to the discriminatory practices involving charging First Nations of their rightful use, possession, and transport of eagle feathers and parts. To the BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly call on conservation officers and other law enforcement to work with appropriate Indigenous restorative justice processes of First Nations wrongly convicted and or charged for their rightful use, possession, and transport of eagle feathers and parts. 3, the BCAF and Chiefs in Assembly call on the Attorney General of British Columbia to order an investigation and prosecution of those conservation officers who conspired in 2005 and 2006 to prosecute innocent Aboriginal people by means that included, among other things, fabrication of evidence, counseling Aboriginal people to commit offenses, entrapment, publishing false media releases, and defrauding the government of British Columbia by schemes designed for personal enrichment. The consequences of this government conduct resulted in loss of liberty, imprisonment, loss of livelihood, dignity, privacy, and personal relationships with lasting effects to this day. 4, the BC Chiefs, AFN Chiefs in Assembly urge provincial agents to provide redress, including restitution, repatriation, and the reversal for convictions for violations of First Nations rights to use, possess, and transport eagle feathers and parts. And 5, the BC AFN Chiefs in Assembly Director, Regional Chief, and staff to advocate and call for reform of the Wildlife Act in order to uphold the minimum standards set out in the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? I see Chief Donna Ajam has her hand up. She's taking that down. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Chief Donna Ajam?
Yes. I was wondering if we shouldn't include something along the lines that we should be exercising our own laws and creation of exercising our sovereign right to bring up traditional religious ceremonies that we utilize, right? So that this also not follows the colonial law, but enacts our own law that we had in the past. That way somebody's not killing an eagle like it was down on the coast before, that these eagles are actually given to us freely of their own choosing and delivered to us through other people, not through poaching and hunting statistics. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I see Marina's on top of that already. Thank you. While we're doing that, Proxy Warner Adam.
Thank you, Harold. I think it's important to ensure that this resolution don't basically open the doors where it's free for all to hunt eagles. So I agree with the previous speakers that conservation of the eagles is really important, and we need to be cautious in terms of how resolutions like this are worded to make sure that the species are protected first and foremost. Thank you.
Yeah, and Warner, is that implementation advice, or are you looking for some possible wording?
Probably implementation advice, Harold. I'm just if a reader that doesn't have the background information might basically state that we have the right to hunt eagles for ceremonial purposes, and then the population of eagles decline. So I'm just basically providing some caution.
Thank you very much, Warner. Appreciate that. And so it looked like Maureen has responded to that initial comment. So the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly urge BC First Nations to utilize our own Indigenous laws, orders, traditions in order to use, possess, and transport eagle feathers and parts. And I think in some respects that does respond to what Proxy Adam had said as well. First of all, to the mover and seconder, are you okay with this addition?
Yes. Chief Leon. Chief
Harvey's
Leon.
good. Chief Leon's good.
I'm good with the changes. I think it's important that we add in what was added in, because here in Stales we don't condone poaching of eagles for sale, for profit in any way. So that's an awesome addition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Noting that, let us go to Chief Robbins and Proxy Adina Young for a discussion. Chief Robbins.
Yeah, just around the First Nations Wildlife Act that's being developed. I think some of this can be developed there through the Wildlife Act around conservation measures. But I agree that it does need to be a nation-based approach, whether it's Secwepemc Nation, Okanagan, Statlium, whatever it may be. They need to develop their own laws around the use of eagle feathers.
I do see some additional hands raised. So just before we carry on with this discussion, I do want to note that we are at 1:05. I do see some people joining us because we were designated for the election results at 1 o'clock. Just to clarify that for everyone, as we noted earlier, the electoral officer has extended the voting for a certain period to deal with some of the issues they were encountering. And we are awaiting word from the electoral officer on the completion of that vote and the timing of the announcement. So just as information to everyone, let us go to Proxy Adina Young.
Thank you. I think maybe just a suggestion for where it's now number 4 and it's the second to last line where it says loss of livelihood. And
Yep.
we changed the last resolution from livelihood to way of life. So I wonder if we just have the consistency of loss of, I think maybe even cultural identity.
Yeah, and I would just, I'll look for clarification, but the way that one was written, that often might mean sort of economic livelihood. But I'll look to the mover and seconder or to clarify that if they're okay with changing livelihood to loss of cultural identity.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
And
I'm good with it.
all right.
I'm good with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Let us go then to Cookby Christian.
Harold and Kukupis, when we're having this discussion, and I'm just really mindful that our relationship with the Spellhawks, the bald eagle, Spiwanui, the golden eagle, is a sacred relationship that was, somebody had mentioned, was given to us as a way to communicate with Talkukbi, the creator. He takes our prayers, and the feathers we use in ceremony and dance and processes are really an integral part of who we are, and in terms of our own identity, but also that spiritual connection. And I understand what the resolution is doing, but I think we need to convey really clearly that this is sort of something from, if you will, from time immemorial that our people have been doing. It's only in recent years that they have been imposing upon us, their laws and their processes so that it interferes with our way of life. So our job is to help protect, the eagle, but also to understand that there is that special sacred relationship with the eagles. They help us, they're helpers to us. They come to us in many different forms. So that's kind of what I was thinking about in this discussion, because I understand as I was reading the therefore be it resolves, the section on what happened by the provincial government conservation officers and what they did to these men or women was just unbelievable. It's again a real example of systemic racism, entrapment, putting people in jail, false evidence. It just made my blood boil, actually. I just was really pissed off as I was reading. I just kept shaking my head. So I understand the intent of the resolution, but we can't lose focus that the Eagles are a real integral part of who we are and our connection to the spirit world. And so I want to thank the chiefs that have put this resolution on the table, but I think we must not lose focus that the Eagles in our way help us. You know, we use our fans in brushing off ceremonies. We use the feathers in dance, and we use them to show honor to people. The highest honor is to give somebody an eagle feather. And so I just want to say that, and I know it's probably contained within the resolution, but that's what I see in terms of what we're doing here, is to say that their system, what they've done here is really disrespected the eagle. Not only the human beings as us, but they disrespected that eagle in terms of what it means to us. So I just want to say that, Harold, and to the mover and secretary, I appreciate the resolution. Cookstram.
Thank you very much, Cookby. I do see Cookby Ignace and Chief Ralph Leon in the speakers list, so let's go to them, and then we'll see if we're able to move to the question at that point. Cookby Ignace.
To the top of the resolution, please. Or is it, oh, no, sorry, down the
other top?
Oh, yeah, I lost my spot. Oh, right there, number one in number one. What I'd like to add to the end of after feathers and parts are a pre-existing right recognized in law by Canada. Or just or a pre-existing right, I guess.
Yeah.
Because the Supreme Court ruled that we do have pre-existing rights, that is rights that existed uncontaminated and exist pre-colonialism, and those rights still exist today. And this right to utilize and in all the sacred ways that have been discussed here of the eagle as our helper is a pre-existing right that Canada ought not to be meddling in. And we have laws that govern how we utilize those feathers and eagle parts.
Thank you. I'll look
in a respectful manner.
Thank you, Cookby. I'll look to the mover and seconder to see if they're okay with the addition in number one, therefore be resolved one. And I do see that Chief Leon is on the speakers list, so let's go to you, Chief Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cookby, Wayne, Christian, you hit it right on the nail again. And I know there's so much knowledge in this Zoom meeting, and it affects all of us. All of us, you know, behind me. That's my skates that I get to use, you know, from my people, and their feathers. And this resolution touches on those that were put in jail. This touches on the conservation officers who brought alcohol onto many communities, getting people drunk, prepaying them money to go get eagles for them. So conservation officers themselves sentenced those eagles to death. And in return, they'd use their British Columbia MasterCard and go withdraw $1,500. Then they take $1,450, put it in their pocket. They take the other 50 and give it to a First Nations. So they pre-sentenced all those birds to death themselves. And what they were doing was lining their own pockets. So utilizing our people who are maybe residential school survivors, day school survivors, those that are in not a very good place in their minds to put all this together. This is what this resolution is for. We need to put the government body in their place, and exactly what Cookbay Wayne Christian said is exactly true. So I just wanted to add that, and I'm very excited, and I'm very good with all the changes that everybody is putting in. And yes, the chief was right. Where this came from was a long time ago, and the conservation officers were supposed to make it right because it was publicized that a bunch of eagles were found in the bush and near the coast. Yes, that is true. And they were supposed to make it right. But in return, they filled their own pockets. They put our people in jail, and all of that stuff that it says in there. ACM.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Chief Ignace and Chief Leon to lower their hands. We're just going to make a structural amendment to the therefore be it resolved. And Maureen, I'll just ask you to move inherent pre-existing right recognized by law in Canada to earlier in that section. So just in the second line, address issues related to, and then include that, and then say, and the discriminatory practices. Again, just grammatically, it was bugging me. All right, with that, just moving that for grammatical. Let us then move to the question. So are there any abstentions to this resolution as amended? Are there any abstentions? Seeing or hearing none? Then let us move to the objections. Are there any objections to this resolution as amended? Hearing or seeing none, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing no objections, then with your permission, Chiefs, we will note that this resolution as amended is carried. Thank you very much for that. We will move to the legal strategy to address wildlife management, moved by Chief Byron Lewis, seconded by Chief Lee Spahan, both who are indicated as being present in the meeting. The therefore be it resolved in fact reflect the whereases that are there, and so we will move. There's looks to be 9 there whereases. So therefore be it resolved that the BC Chiefs and Assembly fully support the Okanagan Indian Band's efforts to identify potential legal options to address the Crown's failure to protect wildlife populations and habitat, and its failure and to attempt to justify its infringement of Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. 2, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly direct the BCAFN Regional Chief and staff to support the Okanagan Indian Band and other First Nations to develop a comprehensive legal and political strategy to address the Crown's failure to protect wildlife populations and habitat, and its failure to attempt to justify its infringements of Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. And 3, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly direct the BCAFN Regional Chief and staff to undertake the above actions in collaboration and coordination with others similar affected Indigenous groups outside of BC. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, then let us move to the question. Are there any abstentions to the resolution on the legal strategy to address wildlife management? Are there any abstentions? Seeing or hearing none, are there any objections to the resolution on the legal strategy to address wildlife management? Seeing or hearing none, or seeing or hearing no objections, then let us thank the chiefs and proxies and note that this resolution is carried by consensus. Again, as a reminder, as we move to the next resolution, the call for the Development of Indigenous Youth Housing Action Plan, I will remind those who are joining us for the 1 o'clock announcement of the election, we are waiting word from the electoral officer on that process, and we'll keep you updated as we can do that. I see Cookie Wilson is the mover of this resolution 17, and Chief Harvey McLeod is the seconder, noting that they are both present in the room. And in the interest of time, let us then move to the therefore be it resolved. Therefore be it resolved that the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly call upon the Ministry of Children and Family Development to provide information on the cohort of youth expected to age out of care on March 31st, 2021 by January 15, 2021 to the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly. This information should include the number of youth aging out per community and what type of housing intervention is needed to prevent homelessness for each individual young person to allow for the development of a comprehensive youth housing strategy. 2, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly call upon the provincial government to ensure all Indigenous youth have a housing plan that is sustainable, safe, and secure prior to aging out of care during COVID-19, including an extension of emergency measures post March 31st for youth who do not have appropriate housing or support to thrive. And 3, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly support the BCAFN Regional Chief and staff to work with the UBCIC and First Nations Summit and as the First Nations Leadership Council with the BC Coalition to End Youth Homelessness and other like-minded organizations to develop youth housing strategies and an Indigenous youth housing action plan. I see Chief Thomas has her hand up for discussion on this resolution.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I think this is a bigger issue than just youth homelessness. We've had a few aging out come home. They're supposed to have an aging out plan. They just showed up. We had to help our aging out youth to find not just housing. Some needed actual medical care and other issues. There were other issues in terms of mental health, and there should have been a plan for aging out and a process that was followed. And because none of that happened, we've been dealing with it in our community. So I would suggest that there's reference made to the aging out procedures and the plan that has to be reviewed. And it needs to happen every year. We can't just keep doing this ad hocly in our communities. And sometimes they're stuck in another town, and then they just phone and then we find out. So anyway, I support this resolution. I just want to make it up more and make sure that we're looking after the 4 areas of our youth, not just the housing, their mental health, their physical health, and their education plans, because really they're supposed to be responsible for education planning until they're 27. So we need to ensure our request includes all those areas. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief Donna Aljam.
Yes, just to follow up on Jackie as well too. We're still recovering from the 60s scoop. We're still recovering from residential. No plans have been made for it. There's kind of Band-Aid fixes temporarily right now that we're struggling with, but we're developing everything as it's coming along. And I do agree, we need to forecast something bigger and better in regards to that, either housing plan development, working with CMHC or other entities to develop something like that, because not only do they need to come home as we all want them to, they need to know how to survive afterwards, because you've heard those news reports before where they've been kicked out as of 18 and here you go, here's a room, it's paid for a month and you're on your own. We've got nothing more to do with you. So we need those mentors in place that kind of helps them. We need life skills in place to at least show them the path that they can follow. Introduce them to other things that they can work towards and get from. So Yeah, it's more than just the housing part of it. It's just the start. Thank you.
Thank you. Could be Christian.
Kuksham, Harold, this, what we're talking about in terms of the aging out process in children, it needs to really be expanded. Like we've named MCFD, but I think one of the other key players in this process is Community Living BC. Those for adults that have developmental disabilities, and there's a whole 24/7. And because of what's happened with the youth in terms of in care and what's transpired over the generations, is there's a lot of them that we talked about it yesterday, end up incarcerated and end up in jail because they have no place to go, or they have mental health issues, or they have developmental physical issues. So I think this strategy has to expand it a little more and look at the provincial government, not only MCFD, but Community Living BC and other entities that have a piece of the pie, so to speak, because what government does, they work in isolation and nothing happens for the child. And then they fall through the cracks and we hear about it on the news. And so I think we need to be more strategic and more forceful around forcing British Columbia into a more collaborative overall strategy for children that are aging out. And Community Living BC, I think, is one of the key components in this because they take on the responsibility of children that have developmental disabilities, and they take them on for life. So I think we need to amend the resolution to in that part of it and bring in other agencies to the table for to give direction as to how they can actually work together and collaborate and create a good strategy and plan for these children that are aging out and ending up on the streets, ending up in addictions and ending up in jails. Let's do something. And I think we've got to really push hard on this for the children. It's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I will note that Maureen has added to therefore be resolved too, and comprehensive transition plans that address the needs of youth in a holistic way to sort of cover the need for annual reporting, supports, policy improvements, progress, that kind of stuff. I will ask Chief Thomas and Chief Aljan to lower their hands, and I do see 4 or 5 other hands, but I am in 6 other hands, and so I'm a little anxious to get to the question on this one. Chief Courtney Adolph Jones.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just some thoughts on perhaps the second therefore, and just a more of a summary of what the other chiefs are speaking to, and that's just implementation of wraparound services. This resolution really does speak to the placement of ministry, children, and family in this issue, but there really does need to be a plan or strategy in place where all the services, including education, mental health, general health, access to counseling, so mental health. So I think just having that incorporated into the resolution is important because it's an indication that we're not isolating this to an approach with one government agency, but it really does require multiple agencies to be involved in this strategy to end homelessness with our youth.
Okay, great. And Maureen's adding those. So let's go to Chief Don Harris.
Yes, and I agree with including all the other agencies, but it's not just Ministry of Child and Family that we're dealing with. We're dealing with designated agencies as well. Is that many of you heard me for years trying to create the communication with designated agencies regarding our youth and care, and we still struggle in trying to get communication with designated agencies. Like we're not part of their catchment area, but some of our families live in catchment areas, and there is no communication from designated agencies whatsoever, other than email that they're taking action or they're going to court, or usually a fax. But it can't be just Ministry of Child and Families. I know there's a lot of issues with Ministry of Child and Families, and for my community, we've dealt with that side, the ministry, but we still struggle with the other agencies that fail to communicate with us and refuse to form any kind of protocols or communication protocols or whatsoever. So, I think that we need to add more than just Ministry of Child and Family. We need to add all the agencies, whether it be our own or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Don. Let us go to Chief Morgan and then Cookby Ignace, and then we will look to call.
Yes, can you hear me? Chief Tony
Yes.
Morgan from Gittin-Yell. I just agree with what the chiefs have been talking about with the need for a further plan for the aging out. Because we went through a experience because of some of our kids are living elsewhere, and just last year we had two that needed to be brought home after they aged out. They couldn't leave where they were at right away because they didn't find any way to leave there and didn't know what to do. And they tried to go back to where they were cared for. And the people just locked the door on them, kept them out, and they didn't know what to do. And so we ended up with suicidals, and then trying to bring them. Only when they were brought home, we knew what the extent of why they ended their lives, because there was no plans for them once they were aging out. So I agree with the resolution, and I agree to all the measures that we need to extend for the benefit of our children that have been lost in state's hand. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much. And I'll look to the mover and seconder to approve the amendments that you see on the screen there. And I see that Chief McCall has his hand up. I'll ask Chief Morgan and Chief McCall to lower their hands.
Yes, I really appreciate all of the discussion and the amendments made to this resolution. In September, I was one of a few leaders in this province that lobbied the provincial government, working with the BC Coalition of Youth to End Homelessness. Because of the impending election and the number of individuals that were going to be put on the streets, we wanted to ensure that there was plans and that the youth that were being aging out won't be on the streets during COVID. So we lobbied, we wrote some letters, and we were able to extend the date. I really appreciate, yes, there's a lot that we need to do. There's a lot that we need to understand on our side and community here about the planning and the supports and the networking that we're going to have to be involved to ensure our people, our youth don't get lost in another system, the system on the streets. So thank you very much, White Limerick.
Thank you very much. And Cookby Wilson, just to make sure you agree with the amendments, and we're ready to move to the question.
Yes, thank you. And I thank you for all the additions to this resolution. I really do think we do need also to include a review of this issue because it was just Harvey and I were alerted on Friday about this. And that's why we were calling for emergency resolution, but appreciating we want to look at more the systemic and the numerous other issues affected with aging out. There could be the review, and then because I know there's lots of reports on it and a lot of the chief's experiences on it, and then we could bring back a more fulsome report with recommendations. If you can include that, there would be a review and reporting out to the chiefs so that we have something more comprehensive, and that we can also be looking at developing that we're part of the jurisdiction and we're part of the action plan developing. So I think that would be really critical for our chiefs to be involved. And we've had provincial-wide forums on children and family. We've had numerous, other jurisdiction forums. We're engaging in C92, but this is like an issue that happens every year where the ministry releases the aging out, and we were trying to get ahead of this part, but I appreciate that we can maybe have a more procedural type approach to it, and that we can address the emergency issue as well as have the short-term and long-term work on it. Thank you. So I accept the changes, however the chiefs are directing, and just that we got to get on with getting ahead of this homelessness issue right away, and then come back with a more fuller report on all the issues, and we can discuss the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. We're just waiting for me to make the addition of that process section about reporting back. Great. Thank you. As that was offered by the mover, and then we'll note that that is acceptable. And then let us move to the question. So on the resolution relating to the Indigenous Youth Housing Action Plan, is there any abstentions to the resolution as amended? Are there any abstentions to this resolution as amended? Hearing none, are there any objections to this resolution as amended? Hearing or seeing none, are there any objections to this resolution? And then finally, I will note that in the chat, a number of people have given some advice around the implementation, and that of course has been noted. And then with your permission, Chief, we will note that this resolution as amended is carried by consensus. I will note to the Chiefs that there are 4 more resolutions remaining, and then we will then turn to the election finalization. We are now turning to, losing my track here, 19, I believe. Excuse me. Support for the First Nations Relationship Protocol with the Canadian Red Cross, moved by Chief Don Tom, and we will need a seconder for this. And again, this relates to emergency management, and we'll go to therefore be it resolved. Therefore be it resolved that the BC AFN Chiefs and Assembly support the BC AFN Regional Chief to sign the attached draft relationship protocol between the BC Assembly of First Nations Summit and the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, working collectively as the First Nations Leadership Council and the Canadian Red Cross, and 2, the BC AFN Chiefs and Assembly Director Regional Chief, working with the First Nations Summit and the Union of BC Indian Chiefs as the First Nations Leadership Council and the Canadian Red Cross to provide regular reports to the BC AFN Chiefs and Assembly on the ongoing collaborative objectives and efforts as identified in the attached relationship protocol. May I have a seconder for the resolution? I see Chief Gordon Planitz. Thank you. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, let us then move to the question. Are there any abstentions to this resolution? Are there any abstentions to this resolution to support the relationship protocol with the Canadian Red Cross on emergency management? Hearing or seeing none, are there any objections to this resolution? Hearing or seeing none, are there any objections? Or I'm trying to think if I did it already because looks like we're good. Maureen has already indicated there that this resolution is carried by consensus. So thank you very much for that, Chiefs. Let us quickly move to 19. So 19, support for the Indigenous early learning and childcare funding to flow to the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society, moved by Chief Stuart Jackson. I will need a seconder to this resolution, and we're all aware of the process that has been going on around the early learning financial supplements and the work that's being done there, and as well as some emergency funding. Therefore, we'll move to the oh, sorry, I do see, I'm just looking at my screen versus the Marines. I do see it is Chief Lee Spahan and Chief Harvey McLeod who are standing in as the mover and seconder for that. And then let us move to the therefore be it resolved. The BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly support the emergency IELCC funding to flow to the BC Aboriginal Child Care Society as the regional lead agency in Indigenous early learning and child care. The BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly call on the BC ACT's Board of Directors and staff to work directly with all First Nations to ensure that the IELCC programs and services are supported and resourced. And 3, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly Director, BCAFN Regional Chief, and staff to work with the BC ACT and the First Nations Summit and Union of BC Indian Chiefs as the First Nations Leadership Council to ensure emergency IELCC funding best responds to and supports First Nations children, families, and communities in ways they determine. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Seeing and hearing none, then let us move to the question. Are there any abstentions to this resolution? I see Chief Ray Giroux has raised his hand as an abstention. Are there any further abstentions to this resolution? Are there any further abstentions to this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, then I look to see if there are any objections to this resolution. Are there any objections to this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, then with your permission, we indicate this resolution is passed by the consensus of the remainder. Thank you very much, Chiefs. Let us move to Resolution 20, support for BC ACT's and Indigenous Learning and Childcare Framework and Strategy. So I will need a mover and seconder for this resolution, and that we can go to the therefore be it resolves. Therefore be resolved that the BC AFN Chiefs and Assembly fully provide continued support to the BC Aboriginal Child Care Society, BC ACT, as the regional lead agency in the ongoing development and implementation of the regional IELCC early learning and child care strategy. The BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly call on the BC ACT Board of Directors and staff to inform the framework implementation subject to ongoing engagement and partnership development for regional First Nations leadership via advice and direction from chiefs, community leaders, and stakeholders. And 3, the BCAFN Chiefs and Assembly direct the regional chief and staff to work with BC ACT, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and the First Nations Summit as the First Nations Leadership Council to support ongoing engagement and implementation processes in BC, as well as to help provide the political leadership for the regional partnerships that will be required to ensure the IELCC framework best responds to and supports First Nations children, families, and communities in ways they determine. Again, just noting this is a mirrored resolution from a previous organizational meetings. I look to Chief Maureen Lugie and then Chief Spahan for discussion, or for movers and seconders, sorry. Maureen Lugie and Chief Spahan, I'm assuming that is your offer. And I do thank Chief Jackson for his offer as well on that. And just want to make sure that I'm clear on that.
Yes.
And then, thank you, Chief. And Chief Spahan, you're seconding?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Chief Spahan, I'll ask you to lower your hand in the participants list. Thank you. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, let us then move to the question. Are there any abstentions to this resolution? Are there any abstentions to this resolution? I see Cookby Christian indicating an abstention. Are there any objections to this resolution? Are there any objections to this resolution? Seeing or hearing no objections to this resolution, then with your permission, We'll note the decision that this, Kupi Ignace, I see your hand up. Is that an objection to the resolution? Kupi Ignace, if you could clarify.
Abstention, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the clarification. Noting no further objections or abstentions or objections, then with your permission, we will note that this resolution is carried by the consensus of the remainder. Let us move to resolution 21, which is an omnibus resolution to adopt 5 resolution and is our last resolution. So upon review of the resolutions, these 5 are mirrored resolutions from the UBC and the First Nation, UBCIC and First Nation Summit meeting. And just in terms of the ones that are there, we do have an addressing priority concerns and needs of BC First Nations around COVID-19. We have implementation of an old growth strategy that protects First Nations welfare and endangered old growth forests. We have support for First Nations Leadership Council participation in monitoring of the Indigenous Flood Working Group and the development of the provincial flood risk strategy. We also have the support for First Nations Leadership Council MOU with the BC Aboriginal Child Care Society. And we also have the support for the First Nations Leadership Council MOU with the BC Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. Is there a need for, so do I have a mover and second? I need a mover and seconder of the omnibus resolution. I see Chief Ignace. Your hand is still up, Chief. Are you offering to move this resolution?
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
No problem. So I do need a mover of the omnibus resolution. I see Chief Gordon Planis. Thank you very much, sir. I'll need a seconder. Chief Byron Lewis. Thank you very much, sir. And with that, is there a need for discussion of this omnibus resolution to adopt 5 mirrored resolutions? Is there a need for discussion? Is there a need for discussion?
Question.
I see a hand from Chief Donna Aljam.
It's just a question on the last one. I understand the first 4 resolutions, but I'm just wondering about the last one. What does that have to do with forestry or that, right?
Okay, so perhaps a little bit of clarification of why this one was added to the omnibus. And again, I don't think it's subject matter, it's just that they are all mirrored resolutions, but I'll look for clarification. Perhaps Maureen, if you're in a position to offer that.
Sorry,
Or if
the question was with respect to the last one?
Yes, exactly. Why is it in the omnibus? Is it a different subject matter, it sounds like?
Oh, these were all included because they were all mirrored resolutions from the union and the summit. So they've been supported at the summit and the union. Other than that, that was the only reason it was included in the omnibus.
Okay. And is there, Chief Aljam, is that sufficient, or would you like a little background on the MOU?
No, that helped clear it up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there a need for further discussion on the omnibus resolution? Chief Robbins?
Yes, I'd like a little more information around it. I haven't been able to attend any of the summit or union BC Indian chiefs. Could I get some more information?
On the MOU, the last one there?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'll look to BCAFN if we have somebody who can, or if any of the chiefs who were involved in that resolution could speak to the MOU with the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. You will note in the package that the actual resolution is there. And that's quite a lengthy part of the package. And so we did have Cookly Christian and Cookly McLeod on that resolution initially.
I'll just give, I'll just outline in the agreement, the purpose. The protocol
you.
sets out a mutual commitment of the parties to engage in outgoing joint dialogue and action on a broad range of issues and initiatives to promote Indigenous human rights, uphold the dignity of Indigenous people, and address the root causes of discrimination and inequality experienced by Indigenous people in British Columbia. So it's a table to set up and have dialogue with the Human Rights Commissioner on the issues that we've been facing as individuals and communities over the last few years, last year mainly around discrimination, one of them.
Thank you, Chief Robbins. Your hand's back up.
Yeah, sorry about that. Around the old growth management, I haven't seen that resolution. Can the mover and seconder explain
Which one is that?
around the old growth management?
Okay.
Forest,
So in there,
forest.
yes. Okay, so I'm just looking through the resolutions package. So it is there. I'm just trying to find it. Yeah, so there is a more detailed resolution there. There was no mover and seconder on that. Is there someone who can provide a little bit of background information on that resolution? I will note that there are 20 therefore be resolves on it, and that it does then refer to fully supporting First Nations allies who are protesting negligent logging and clear cutting practices enabled by the BC government, which undermine our First Nations title and rights and push Vancouver Island's old growth forests to the brink of collapse. That the BCAF and Chiefs and Assembly fully support the old growth strategic review panel's report and recommendations that are vital to creating a new sustainable old growth strategy, and call upon the provincial government to take immediate and sustained action to ensure that the report's recommendations are carried out, with First Nations included and consulted every step of the way. And continues on, there are 3 more, therefore be it resolved. Provide more details on the plans to shift logging deferrals to permanent protection and working in partnership with impacted First Nations to engage in discussions on expanding these deferrals to include all threatened old growth forests. And then also to work with other like-minded organizations to urge the federal and provincial government to provide dedicated funding to the First Nations, Indigenous, protected and conserved areas and First Nations land use plans, as well as financial support for First Nations communities to manage and steward those Indigenous protected and conserved areas. And then 5, urge the Ministry of Forestry, Land, Natural Resources to consult and engage with First Nations communities, including the First Nations Forestry Council and the Leadership Council on a renewed strategy. So just going through those fairly briefly, Chief Robbins. I will note I see Chief Lewis and Hobart and Thomas with hands up, so let's turn to them.
Good afternoon, everyone. Byron Lewis, Chief of the Okanagan Band. The reason why I second this motion was, for the support of this motion, is the fact when you look around in, especially in the province of British Columbia, one of the most endangered old growth forests is low elevation old growth. When you look on most of the areas, especially in the Okanagan, on what they call low elevation ponderosa pine forests. The only place you're going to find those left is on reserve. Everywhere else, they've just been decimated. Or if you go down into the canyon, you look at what's been happening with some of the old growth down there, and last of the habitat for such species like spotted owl and others, but the list goes on. And there's very few locations anywhere in the province where you still have old growth, and especially at the lower elevations. So what little that's left, we have to really move to protect, because it's not only the demise of those forests, but it's more likely the extinguishment of species that are directly really related to that. So this is really important for all of us for protection of biological diversity. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chief Hobart. I'll ask you to unmute your mic, Chief Hobart. Your mic is still muted, Chief Hobart.
Can you hear me?
There you go.
Yeah, I'm actually supporting this, and I wanted to move this because of right now in my nation, the last two spotted owls that are mating in the wilderness are their nests being robbed of the chicks. Then they're hatching, or the eggs, and they're hatching them in captivity, and they have, I think, 13 chicks hatched successfully in captivity. We have a mating pair in the Spuzzum Valley, and we have one single male up at Uselitz Creek, and they know of this, and yet there's and they only grow. The old spotted owl, northern spotted owl, only live in the old growth timber. And to us in our nation, we believe that there are messengers of the health of the forest, as well as the health of our ancestors. And right now, the spotted owls like I say, there's two of them. They know of them, but at the same time, they're holding them in captivity, not releasing even one female for this other male that's there. And they also are there's roads that BCTS has built into different polygons of old growth right in our nation. So right now it's we do have a court case pending, and we're pushing them. We've even talked to the federal government, Wilkinson. He's going to try to push the provincial government, because the provincial government is not moving fast enough. Obviously, they said they had a plan in place, and through support through Lenore Baker, she actually researched that there was a plan in place, but it was never realized, and they didn't fulfill the entire plan, and yet they're saying that it failed. But they didn't even hold themselves accountable, and right now the old growths are still being targeted, and their plan is to hold off these chicks that are in that captivity until they feel that the environment is successful for them to grow. But at the same time, they're targeting the environment that they live in. And so, yeah, I wanted to put my support, and I want other people to. I've sent an email out to the chiefs in the last 2 weeks ago, I think, with the dire need to have our support, because if we have to, we'll take it on the ground to keep the people from to keep BCTS or anybody out of that valley to do any other logging or anything that might affect these birds and our trees.
Thank you very much, Chief Hobart. I'll ask you to lower your hands. In terms of this, I was just to double checking with Maureen, but I think we do have a mover and seconder for the omnibus resolution in which this is included. Let us go to proxy Jackie Thomas, then Don Chief Harris, then Chief Jack, and then we will look to call the question.
I'm personally in support of this motion, understanding if they're talking about an area that's somebody else's territory on the island and things like that. But I do support this motion. I live in the devastated mountain pine beetle area and understand totally the brink of extinction discussion that Chief Byron was talking about, because we're in the same boat here. And don't forget, some of these things are bigger than just like one area. This is affecting the provincial landscape. And, even though we've tried our best to protect our biodiversity and old growths, sometimes those are targeted. The whole low elevation stuff and, the watershed where all the swamp areas are, they're even targeting that. So I'm speaking in support of this and informing the rest of the chiefs that it's not just on the Vancouver Island, it's everywhere. And we really urgently need change to the Forest Act and change to the way that things are governed in this province. It's getting pretty dire. We've lost a few species already here. Must see.
Thank you, Proxy Thomas. I'll ask you to lower your hand, and we'll turn to Chief Harris.
Yes, it's just a comment on these mirrored resolutions. I'm just quickly going through trying to find my packs, my resolutions, so I can try and brief through them. So a lot of them I'm unaware of. First is that I'm not part of the First Nations Summit. Second is that I'm in the habit of paying my fees for the union at the meeting. So because there was no in-person meetings, I never paid for it. And so that means that meant I was locked out of the last UBCIC meeting. I had no voice there, so no voice. I chose not to attend to watch somebody else decide my fate. So I'm just voicing that concern when it comes to these mirrored resolutions that it's on me that I didn't go back and completely go through everything, but I just thought I needed to voice my concern that I do have issues with today's mirrored resolution because again, I'm not part of the summit, and I was kind of locked out of having a voice at the last UBCIC. So thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing and for helping us understand that perspective. Let us turn to Chief Jack, and then we will look to call the question. Chief Harris, I'll ask you to lower your hand.
Yeah, Gala Kessler, Mr. Chair, thank you for a minute. I just want to thank Chief Plennis and Chief Louis for this. I agree with it 100%. And the only reason why I'm saying anything is because a couple of years ago, we went to a Kofi conference in Vancouver, and Western Forest Products president was on the stage, and they had this pigeonhole or whatever you call it, where he answered questions. He answered every question but mine. I asked, why have you never found a CMT or an archaeological site in Muwachit-Muchlit territory? In the Neutral territory, Muwachit-Muchlit is the biggest out of all the 14 nations. And like I was saying before, Western's taken 5 million cubic meters of wood out of our territory. That's a lot of wood when you think about it. And I just want to thank the mover and the seconder for this. It means a lot to me, and I just need to share that and say thank you so much. Klako.
Thank you very much, Chief Jack. I'll ask you to lower your hands. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let us turn to the question on this omnibus resolution. Are there any abstentions to the resolution to adopt 5 resolutions? I see Chief Fred Robbins as an abstention. Are there any additional? I see Chief Don Harris as an abstention. Are there any additional abstentions? Are there any additional abstentions? Chief Harris, you can lower your hand. Thank you. Seeing no further abstentions, are there any objections to the resolution to adopt the omnibus resolution to adopt 5 resolutions? Are there any objections to the omnibus resolution? Seeing or hearing no objections, then we will note with your permission, chiefs and proxies, that this resolution is adopted by consensus of the remainder. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. That concludes the resolutions process. You will note on our approved agenda that our next action is to hear briefly from the 2 board members who were claimed to the BCAFN Board of Directors. I will turn briefly to them for a comment if they so choose. Chief Roseanne Kazima, to come to welcome, and Chief Brian Asu Wiwakai. Chief Kazima, would you wish to address the Assembly regarding your acclamation to the Board of Directors?
Can you hear me?
Try again. I can.
Can you hear me?
You're hard to hear.
Is that better?
A little bit better. Still a little quiet, but I think we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, no, I would like to. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So, Waikwapaitip, Cookby, Golden Day woman Roseanne Kasmer, runs west of the Kamloops Shwetmuk. Hello, everyone. My name is Roseanne Kasmer, and I am very happy to be here with all of you today. Koopsman and Nelia Tasit. Protocols that include song and or a prayer to start meetings sets the tone with positive energy and gratitude. So I just want to say special thank you to our knowledge keepers, Dr. Gwendolyn Point and Chief Joseph, for starting us off in a very good way and filling each of us with some good medicine for all of us to do what we're here to do for all our people. It is with great pleasure to be here to address all of you, to address on the unceded ancestral lands of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and the Salish peoples, and to be sharing my appreciation for the appointment by acclamation to the BCA-FN directorship for the next 3 years. For all the delegates in attendance, I am at home and I acknowledge that I am on the direct unceded ancestral lands of the Kamloops Shwetmuk people, and we are one of 17 campfires within Shwapakulu. The Kamloops is my area of responsibility as an elected chief under our own custom election code. My community and my council are very proud that I am representing them here at the BCAFN board level and working alongside as directed by the BCAFN chief representing the bands within BC. Not physically being able to attend in person is definitely has its challenges. And I do know that we all have to be creative to find ways to connect. And, you know, this year platform that has been created has truly been appreciated and has been easy to follow and utilize. As Cookbee Chief of Tecumseh to Secwepemc, I lift my hands up and acknowledge all who participated and contributed to the works of the Board of Directors of the BCAFN and all those who put their names forward and who are representing the board. For me, this is going to be an incredibly valuable experience to be a part of the BCAFN team. And this position will enhance my skill sets and knowledge to share with my community to advance our works that are in progress. I thank my membership, friends of the band, my council, and all my consultants and leadership at all levels who have extended their warm and positive regards to this acclamation. I would also like to acknowledge the Cookbees who have nominated me for this board of director position, and all of the Cookbees throughout Secwepemc who extended many congrats to the acclamation to the board and working with all the board members and extended congratulations to Chief Brian Azu for his acclamation as well. For Tecumseh Secwepemc, this has been very big news, and I have been overwhelmed by media wanting to know about this acclamation and what it means for us at TTS and with the BCAFN. I have expressed to them that for me, this is an opportunity for personal growth and learning more about collective interests and advancing First Nation initiatives and rights at a higher level of First Nation government. And most importantly, being part of an era that is making history during a pandemic and the need for finding hope and holding on to what we can do together to make a difference. I also look forward to my role as a board of director to provide good governance, leadership, and to work and learn from the leadership and technical staff at the BCAFN. I also want to raise my hands to the BC Regional Chief, Terry TG, and to Cheryl Casmer, and acknowledge their incredible strengths and caliber of candidacy to continue BC First Nation advancements, and wish both of them positive sentiments and appreciate both of them for their works, their advocacy, and their interests for working for all of us at the BC provincial level and advancing to the national. I have extensive political experience at the community, municipality, provincial, and federal level to advance community-driven initiatives. And I do look forward to what the future holds for my community, prosperity, and a legacy for future generations. Considering the current COVID pandemic, we as leadership have obligations and responsibilities to plan and protect our communities and our memberships. We share this unprecedented journey in time as we all have to navigate tomorrow, especially knowing that we are in the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. I believe in the strength of our people and the ability to maximize on the progress that we have all made and are moving towards. At TTS, we know that it is important to have and continue to have those roundtable discussions and updates on the state of affairs of outstanding files and/or affairs that we as local First Nations are still seeking to work towards, and that's reconciliation. We can all act as ambassadors by promoting awareness within every level of government, whether it be at the First Nation level, the municipal level, the provincial level, and the federal level. There needs to be improved communication, which will build shared values and better relationships. a little bit about myself. So I am the 14th elected Cookbee chief for my TTS campfire. My lineage does trace back to the last hereditary chief, Louis Kochikin of TTS. My family is from Tecumseh on my father's side from the Okanagan Indian Band, and from my mother's father's side from Goodfish Lake, Alberta. A little bit about my background. Previously, I was a third-term council member for 9 years prior to my chiefdom. I'm currently on the ethics committee of the UBCIC. I am a previous Thompson Rivers University Foundation board member, and I volunteered there for 2 years. I have certificates in business administration and as well as a diploma. I do have a certificate in negotiation skills training, certificate on matrimonial real property training, and very proud that our First Nation community was the first to have a ratified law in place. And we got to share our story on its implementation right across Canada through the Centre of Excellence. I also had some Business Excellence Award as a First Nations woman in business, and that was as a former rap artist. Anyways, needless to say, it was a Rap Zone franchise that promoted healthy eating and lifestyles. I also have background in long-term care aid and home support worker certification. And also I'm a firm believer in learning and practicing our cultural Swiatmik songs and our dances. And, you know, there's, another one that I'm really proud of is I'm also a recipient of a 2000 International Year of Volunteer Certificate from Canada Revenue Agency as a Canadian volunteer from Jean Chrétien, the Prime Minister of Canada back then. I also was a volunteer in the World Fusion of Wearable Art Fashion show that was hosted here at Tecumseh here in 2017 to help raise money and awareness for the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and was very proud to be a part of that as well. So in conclusion, I just want to say thank you and Cooksjatchum, and I look forward to working with and for all of you for the next 3-year term as a member of the board, and would like to acknowledge and thank the organizers and volunteers who have contributed their time and leadership to the success of the 17th annual AGM. So Cooksjatchum, and I look forward to congratulating the newly elected chief this afternoon, as well as the elected youth rep. All of their platforms were absolutely amazing. It was very difficult to choose. They were all amazing, and they have excellent backgrounds and knowledge, and I look forward to that opportunity. Day one was mentioned that it was amazing. I totally concur. It truly was amazing, and I extend appreciation to the presenters, and also an extra appreciation to Minister Mark Miller. The concerns that I brought up yesterday in regards to the contact tracing, he did follow up, and he there was correspondence that was set, so everything is going to be moving a lot more positively in a way that those communication channels are now rectified, and I truly appreciate that, and that's the power of the BCAFN. So I'm very proud of what it's going to be doing for all of us and what it does do. I'd like to keep just a reminder to everyone just to keep safe, and you know, to continue practicing those protocols to ensure that you're keeping your loved ones and yourselves safe in your communities. With that, I'll say look after yourselves, and Cooksjatchum.
Thank you and congratulations, Chief Casimir. Let us turn to Chief Brian Sood, who wish to address the Assembly. I don't see Brian in the Assembly, and so then let us move on. We will then turn to our election chief, the electoral officer, Ron Lawford.
Thank you very much, Harold, and thanks to all of you who have been waiting patiently through this day and getting through a lot of hard work. I know that the last day and a half has been quite a lot, and it seems that quite a bit of good work and a lot of good discussion has taken place. Before I get into the results, I want to again acknowledge how fantastic it is that all of these candidates stood forward as candidates for the BCAFN. I think it's really a testament that they would want to represent the community as a whole. And whether you won or lost, I really appreciate the fact that these candidates stood. I do want to acknowledge that there were a few hiccups during this election, but I believe that overall the process was quite good. A few of you had issues logging into Simply Voting, the voting platform that we used, based off some data entry errors, which I corrected with the vast majority of you on the phone. A number of you didn't initially see the password that was provided in the email, but we resolved those as well, typically by phone. There were also some registration issues for a small number of voters that led to difficulties logging into the Zoom meeting this morning. And those technical issues were no fault of the voters, and I determined that they merited an extension of the voting time. All right, so I am going to share my screen and take you into the voting results. And this is directly into Simply Voting. Now you're all looking for the results right now, but we're not quite on that page yet. I just want to acknowledge that 139 voters cast a ballot in this election, which is a high number. We had 143 registered and 139 voted. You can see a little bit of a chart of when people voted. The vast majority in the in the first hours last night, and then some during the day as well, with just a few at the last minute. All right. Going into the results. There we go. So the results for this election, and the first one here is regional chief, is 57 votes for Cheryl Kasmer and 82 votes for Terry TG, with the person who wins that election, regional chief Terry TG. For female youth representative, it's a little bit closer with Brianna Wilson, 29 votes, Alicia George Bailey with 30 votes, Jade Durnalau with 36 votes, Taylor Ben Sakosa with 39 votes. And so Taylor is the female youth representative-elect in that race. In a few minutes, in fact, right now, I'm going to press this publish button, which allows each of you to look at the results on your screens. You just use your login information that you received earlier to vote, and I'll send out another email so that you can view these results on your screens as well. So again, I really appreciate all the efforts that the candidates made and all of you as voters. I know that this was the first time we did an online election for the BCAFN. Generally, it went quite well. Again, there were a few hiccups, but we resolved them. Thank you very much, and all the very best to those that were elected, and I hope those that were not would remain active within the BCAFN.
Thank you very much, Ron. I really appreciate that. And by our agenda, let us turn to the female youth representative, Taylor Bain Sakosa, for some remarks. Taylor, I'll ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me, Harold, and see me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I'm just on my chief's account because we're here in our council chambers. Yeah, we're patiently waiting the results, and I'm so lost for words. I'm really honored to be elected in this position to represent all nations and all youth across BC. I'd like to congratulate and honor the other 3 youth that ran, Jade, Brianna, and Alicia. It takes a lot of courage to put our names forward and to voice our concerns and to tell the chiefs across BC what we're passionate about and why we want to run. So I applaud all of you for letting your name stand and for sharing some really great words last night at our candidates forum. Yeah, share anything?
So chiefs, counselors, proxies, leaders, and guests, I just wanted to thank you today. It's a joy to speak to you in the home territory of Treaty 8 in our home, Fort Nelson First Nation. Today, it is our honor to blanket and to sing you a traditional Dene song from one of our cultural leaders, Curtis Dickey. And so we are very, very proud of Taylor Dakosa Bain. She is a very proud, healthy, self-reliant leader, and she'll have so much to offer you. Taylor will be patient. I know she will listen to you guys diligently about the concerns that need to be addressed in this province for each nation and each youth. Please reach out to her at any time. She will be there for you. Taylor is not afraid to do what's right. Taylor is not afraid to stand up for what's not popular. And Taylor will not be afraid to use her voice to address your concerns. So she will speak her truth and she will articulate your needs. And today we are so proud of her, and I would ask that our esteemed elder, Liz Logan, please join us in blanketing Taylor, and we'd like to share a component of our culture with you today with the traditional drum song. So please, Liz, join us. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and sharing our very special moment with us. Taylor, we're going to be standing behind you every step of the way, and we're so proud of you. So love you, girl.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Lucy, thank you, Teacher Hopkins.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, Taylor, and the best of luck. We now turn our attention to Regional Chief TG for the reading of the oath of office and his address.
Thank you. Simply humbled with this result. And I do have to, is somebody going to put up the oath of office up to on the screen?
Maureen, are you able to do that? Share screen, or James, share screen the oath of office. Just give Don a minute to find that. There you go.
Thank you, Harold.
Can you see it there, Carrie?
I do. I just want to give me a moment. Daneza, Tekuza, Skyza. Samoy, Simanak, Simamoyget. Chiefs, hereditary chiefs, proxy holders, representatives. I will do the oath of office right now. Oath of office for Regional Chief. Hear me, elders, chiefs, and citizens of the First Nations of British Columbia, as well as friends and guests here assembled. In your sight and in your hearing, I, Terry John TG, take up the duties of the Regional Chief of the British Columbia Assembly of First Nations. I solemnly promise and sincerely pledge to fulfill these duties as they are outlined in our BCAFN Constitution to the best of my abilities. I solemnly promise and sincerely pledge to place the needs of our Assembly above my own comfort. I solemnly promise and sincerely pledge to watch for all dangers and to give you warning. I solemnly promise and sincerely pledge to watch for opportunities to strengthen our peoples and to aid all such efforts. Elders, chiefs, citizens of the British Columbia, of First Nations of British Columbia, as well as friends and guests here assembled. You have heard these, my promises made without equivocation. I will ever call on the Great Spirit for wisdom and help in carrying them out. And if I could sign it virtually, I would be signing it with my knowledge keeper. Thank you for that, Harold. And then maybe I'll just go into my speech and acceptance of this position. Chiefs, guests, leadership, these elections are never easy. And I hold my hand up to those that put their name forward. Cheryl Kasmer for putting her name forward. Brianna, Jade, and Alicia, the other youth who brought their names forward in this election. I think the time of day that we're living in today, the pandemic, simply highlights and perhaps puts another really difficult situation in terms of this election, and really tried our patience, I would say, in terms of an online election that was really, I suppose, in many respects, was a trial by fire. We tried to make sure that it went smoothly as possible, but we all know that there are hiccups in new systems. But thank you to the electoral officer for being accommodating. To the chiefs that elected me, and to those that perhaps never didn't vote for me, I certainly appreciate just you coming here today and hearing your voice and participating in this process. It's important for this situation, or for these positions, to have a process in this election. And I certainly hope I earn your vote and earn your respect moving forward. And like many positions, such as running for chief and council or tribal chief or regional chief, it's not without sacrifice, and that sacrifice is certainly owed to my family, my wife. Behind every man, there's a strong woman, and my wife certainly is a strong woman. I thank Rena Zatorsky, my children, Riley and Rowan. Sorry.
No need to be sorry.
Like you, I think as our bubble is small and it's within our family and a close family, you appreciate what family is. And we certainly know that within the pandemic. And certainly thank my extended family, my mother, Sarah TG, my brothers and sisters, my extended family, my in-laws, my outlaws. Thank you for that, and thank you very much for supporting myself. It's not just simply myself. It comes with family and friends, close friends that really support me. My campaign team, campaign manager, Claire Marshall, Cole Rayom, I'm forever indebted to you for the amount of time of volunteering and really, pushing me and, getting out there and really being a good campaign managers. And to all the other volunteers, Patty White, David Lugie, Johnny French from my community tackle who did the videos. Thank you. And then, I really appreciate what you've done. Brenda Ireland, all the phone calls that we've done, and it takes a lot to run a campaign, especially when we have 204 chiefs to contact during a pandemic. I want to thank Sikay Duck, Chief for allowing me to be the proxy. Glen Val, First Nations, Chief Tony Sampere, my Gitxsan relatives. Thank you. My nominators, the Chiefs Charlene Gale, Chief Marie Kwok, Chief Otis Guichon, Chief Gary Reese, and I'll forever be indebted to my chief, John Allen French, goes by the hereditary Chief Galahan. Thank you, Masicho. I'll be forever indebted to my community, Takla Nation, for representing my community and my people. To all those that donated to the campaign, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't thank you enough for all the donations that big and small that came in, private donors, etc. And I think, you know, reflecting back to this meeting here, it's, you know, we had 160 plus participants. It's always a challenge, and really want to thank our knowledge keepers and, you know, somebody who's, you know, the two that have been really providing me support in this position, Dr. Robert Joseph and Dr. Gwen Point, knowledge keepers, elders, respected and really providing support and advice. The from the AFN, they've only stated that, you know, you can only have one elder, but we decided here at the BCFN, and this was previous administration decided that we should have a male and female rep for elders and youth. I want to thank the youth, Justin Peters, and now the outgoing female youth, Jay Durando. Thank you, Masicho, for being there and representing our BC youth to the best of your abilities. Masicho, thank you for all that you've done. And board members, during this time, it's, you know, the last 3 years, at times, sometimes it was difficult to have really difficult discussions with my board. Outgoing board members, I just want to thank you, this being your last meeting, Chief Marilyn Slett and Rebecca David, former Chief of Paxton, and Willie Blackwater. I really want to thank all of you for being there and for the support that you gave myself and the direction that you gave to our staff. And also Charles Marvin. I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for all that you have done and continue to do for your people, and also Chief Harvey McLeod. Every time I've asked one of the board members to step in for me, Chief Harvey McLeod has stepped up to the plate and represented that I can attend. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Harvey, for being there and really spreading the, you know, the need that we need in some of these meetings. I'm getting called all over the place sometimes. Our women's rep, Louisa Hosty Jones from HealthSouth, thank you for representing us well here in British Columbia, and continue to do that. Thank you. And this couldn't happen, or the last 3 years couldn't happen, these special chiefs assemblies, these AGMs, these meetings, logistics, you know, the challenges that we have to try to get as many representatives out of the 204 First Nations communities is quite daunting, whether it's meeting physically or online. And that can't happen without some really good staff. And it took a while to get a team up and going in my office. And since I took this position 3 years ago, and I'm indebted to Vanessa West, Clay Tane, my boss, if you will, Chief Executive Officer, my policy analyst, Maureen Bouchan, you all seen, and also Jamie Sanchez, thank you. My executive assistant, from Heidelgut, Victoria Austin. From Glaston, Nakazli, Joanna Prince, thank you. From Claylee, Samantha Seymour, Masi Cho, Sarah Froze, Annette Schroeder, our communications department, thank you. Patricia Rojas, who has an office out in Williams Lake, thank you for being there. Sophia Leopoulos from in our office here in Claylee. Melanie Lyons from Stolo Territory, and also Derek Hansen for Stolo Territory. Thank you for being there. And Maggie Mills and all my staff. I certainly really appreciate for all that you've done in supporting me and supporting this our chief and this regional chief position, as well as our board members, our youth, our elders, and our women's rep, and making us look good. And moreover, I just want to thank you all. And during this time over this election, it's a reflection of how we can come together. And tomorrow and in the next month, we will be meeting again, and we will be meeting as part of the First Nations Leadership Council. So we will all have to work together, including myself, Cheryl, Don Tom, Cookby Wilson, Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, Robert Phillips, and Lydia Whitson, to do the really important work that we have to do in this province, and moreover in this country that we call Canada. Over these last 3 years, it's been an honor and a privilege. And I look forward to the next 3 years, and especially now in this very difficult time in this pandemic, where we're really being tested. We're really being challenged. The last time we went through this, and the world went through this, was 100 years ago in the Spanish flu. We know what all happened there with our oral history, with the histories of our ancestors that told of the decimation that we experienced in our communities. And we're all doing our best to protect our communities, and we need to continue to do that. Whether it's accessing information, putting up roadblocks, checkpoints, or simply accessing the resources that you need to tackle this pandemic. That's the work of this office. That's the work of the First Nations Leadership Council. That's the work of all of us in this room to make sure that our First Nations are protected, and moreover, that our interests, that our rights, our treaty rights, our title, and our interests are protected as well. And as we continue this journey and continue to fight for justice for our people, we remember our ancestors and what they wanted in the future that they wanted to see. And we're a manifestation of that. We may not have reached that final end goal. We may never will in our generation, but nevertheless, we'll continue to fight. So I look forward to this journey with you. I'm once again simply honored, humbled, and I thank you. Tabe Masicho, thank you, big thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for putting your confidence in me. And now is the time to work. Now is the time to move ahead together. And lastly, Harold, good job. Excellent job in keeping us in order. You always do a good job in whether we meet together in the convention center or in situations such as these. Yeah, good job, Harold, and we're forever indebted to you, and look forward to continue to work with you, and thank you all. Thank you all, chiefs, and stay safe and stay well. Masicho.
Thank you very much, Regional Chief, and for the kind words, and congratulations. I extend my greetings and thanks to all those who did put their names forward as well. We just have a few pieces of business before we wrap up. I do want to turn to the Chief of Staff, Vanessa West, who talk a little bit about the blankets, and I know that some blankets have been specifically prepared for this, and we did see Taylor use hers. So Vanessa, if I could get you to come
Harold,
online. Yes.
do I not get to say anything?
If you do, it's not the practice, but I'm comfortable with that. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Thanks for accommodating me, Mr. Chair. Well, I just wanted to say a few quick words. I know that it's the end of a long day and a half. I just really wanted to say that this, this certainly isn't the outcome that we were working towards. However, the experience was amazing, and I was able to meet a lot of chiefs, ones that I'd never met before, reacquainted with some of the ones that I've worked with in years past. And most in particular, it was important for me to hear directly from citizens who participated in the webinars that we hosted. And so we heard from youth and we heard from elders, and I thought that that was really, and it was exciting to me to see that they were able to participate in some way. So I want to start off by acknowledging my Rockstar campaign team. They worked amazing, and they worked tirelessly beside me and helped me get to today. And I just want to let them know that I appreciate everything that they've done, and I love you all. I want to extend my congratulations as well to the new youth female rep, Taylor. I know that it was a really hard decision for all of the chiefs to make a decision out of those 4 women. They are just amazing. And as I mentioned earlier, with young leaders like that in our communities, our future is in good hands. As well, congratulations to the acclaimed board members, Roseanne Casimir and Brian Assu. I'm sure that you will be strong advocates and assets to the BCAFN board. And I also want to extend my thanks to all of the team, the staff who put this together, to Ron, the electoral officer, Harold for chairing and doing an amazing job as usual. And lastly, I want to extend my congratulations to Terry for being the successful candidate and carrying on as being the regional chief. And as I've said before, well, I mean, we're going to continue to work together. I mean, we'll see each other again over the next couple of years, at least for the remainder of my term, as I carry on as a political executive with the First Nations Summit. And so through that avenue, I will continue to lobby and advocate for the change that we want to see based on the direction that you've provided and will continue to provide. Having said that, and it's not anything that Regional Chief hasn't heard from me before, I will be holding you accountable, Terry. Accountable for showing up and accountable for stepping up. We've had way too many meetings where you've left early and we couldn't finish our business, or there was meetings when you didn't even show up. And I think that the leadership in this province deserve more. And I will hold you accountable for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate that. And we have done a number of firsts. So we did an online election. We did hear from the acclaimed candidates. We did hear from the youth candidate. So I do appreciate that. I did want to do one other piece of business before I ask the knowledge keeper, Dr. Chief Roger Joseph, who will help us with the closing. I did want to turn to the Chief of Staff for the BCAFN, talk a little bit about the protocol that went out to all the candidates.
Good afternoon. I just want to acknowledge we just have some feedback. I just want to acknowledge the hard work of all my staff, acknowledge our knowledge keepers for guiding us through this process, our board of directors, and I'd like to congratulate our Regional Chief TG, but also extend my heartfelt thanks to Cheryl Casimir for putting forward her name in looking to filling this position. In recognition of that, we did reach out to the Musqueam Weaver, Deborah Sparrow, and we asked her to develop blankets that we were going to give to the two candidates. So normally we would have had this in an in-person meeting. We would have been able to do our ceremonial protocol of the blanketing, but because of COVID, we've had to change all of our plans. We initially did have plans for us to meet in Vancouver so we could have the candidates at least in one area, but with the public health order that came down, we had to make adjustments to our schedule. So we did have the blankets brought forward, and these will be sent out. So this blanket, that'll be provided to Regional Chief TG, and this was a hand-woven blanket shawl from Musqueam weaver Deborah Sparrow, and this one will be provided to Cheryl Casimir, and thanking for both of the candidates for putting forward their name and their time for this role as regional chief. So those will be sent out to the two. We also had blankets shipped to our newly acclaimed board of directors, Chief Roseanne Casimir and Chief Brian Asu. We also have blankets that are going to be going out to our outgoing board of directors, Chief Marilyn Slett and Rebecca David. And we also had 2 blankets that will be going out to our knowledge keepers, really thanking them for all the work that they did for our AGM and providing this are the guidance and wisdom and the strength to move forward in these trying times. So thank you, Harold, for giving me the opportunity to share.
Thank you very much for that. I do have an announcement also to make regarding the First Nations Energy and Mining Council survey that was done. The draw was done, and Keith Crow was the person who completed the survey and won the MacBook laptop. So congratulations on that. Ladies and gentlemen, we've completed all the work that you had put before us in our agenda. I thank you all for the privilege and the honor of having served as the meeting's helper. And with that, I will look to see if Knowledge Keeper Robert Joseph is able to help us with a closing.
Thank you, Harold. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. What an amazing 2 days it has been. And from where I sit, I see the force of our organization has been so relevant. And I have so much more hope even than before that the BCAFN and all of its relative organizations are on the right path. That we take direction from our past experiences and our history, the voices of our elders. So I want to thank the BCAFN, Terry, TG, the board of directors, the administration, and all of you who have participated over the day, yesterday as well. And to you, Harold, you do an amazing job. And I want to express on my own behalf my gratitude for the expertise and the knowledge that you have around facilitating difficult gatherings and difficult conversations. We now have a direction as a result of the 2 days of meetings. We can move forward clearly with the idea that we have been granted another mandate for the next year coming. And that how we move forward is aligned with the wishes of our members and their communities. And with the re-election of Terry, the new board members, and the youth who have been so inspiring, we can move forward with confidence, knowing that we are equipped with the experience and knowledge to continue to move forward with all of the ideas that we've heard over this 2 days. The BCAFN has been inclusionary, transparent, and respectful. Everybody who has been on this line in this conversation have had the opportunity to speak their voice. And now we need to move forward as one. I just want to close with a brief chant to bless all of us, bless all of you as we move forward into the new year. Be safe, everyone.
Thank you very much for that, Bobby Joseph. I did note that Gwen was busy with some other things, and I just a quick search. I didn't see her in the participants list, but I'll just ask to see if she is there by any chance. But otherwise, with that, I will just once again thank everyone for their participation. Encourage you to all be safe, and look forward to the next time we have an opportunity to gather. And with that, the 17th annual Assembly for the BC AFN is adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Congratulations for a successful BCAFN assembly.